Hello everyone, and welcome to today's program. I am Lyndon Baines Johnson. When you hear my name, you might think of the Vietnam War, the Great Society, or the turbulent transformation of America during the 1960s. But behind these vast historical events, I was, in many ways, like countless others, born into a family burdened by poverty, shaped by the dust, heat, and hardship of rural Texas, and introduced early to the weight of responsibility and the reality of struggle. As I look back on my life, I see more than a path that led me to the Oval Office. I see a road built from battles, sacrifices, ambitions, doubts, and moments that demanded everything I had. Today, I will take you back to the very beginning, to the rocky hills of the Texas Hill Country, where my childhood unfolded among hard labor, simple classrooms, and the unrelenting sun. It was there that I first witnessed how poverty could break a family, how education could change a life, and how government could lift or fail an entire community. I will bring you into the halls of Congress, where debates stretched long into the night, and where a young representative learned how power worked, how alliances were forged, and how compromises were made. I will show you the victories and the setbacks, the strategies and the sacrifices, and the countless unseen struggles that shaped every choice I made. And then came the moment when history thrust me into the vice presidency, a position filled not with glory, but with uncertainty and isolation. On the day President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, the shock tore through the nation and placed a weight upon me that no one could ever fully prepare for. From that moment on, I was no longer simply Lyndon Johnson. I was the man responsible for guiding a grieving and divided country forward. I will tell you how the Great Society began, its true intentions, its hopes, and the enduring inequalities it sought to confront: poverty, racial injustice, lack of education, and the absence of medical care for millions. And I will also confront the shadow that followed me, the Vietnam War. I will speak plainly about why those decisions were made, how they appeared in the moment, and why their consequences still echo today. History has judged these choices in many ways, but I will show you the weight they carried at the time and the burden they left on my soul. Throughout this journey, you will hear my voice, my doubts, my anger, my resolve, my ideals, and my fears. You will hear the truth as I lived it, with all the contradictions and imperfections that came with being human in a time of immense responsibility. This is not a story of pure triumph, nor is it a tale of simple tragedy. It is the story of a man from the countryside who was pushed onto the world stage. A man who tried to change America and was changed by America in return. You will walk with me through the post-war boom, the tension of the Cold War, the rise of the civil rights movement, the machinery of politics, the endless struggle between reform and resistance, the escalation of conflict in Vietnam, and the deep fractures that tore at the nation's unity. That I will show you the history I lived, complex, raw, human, and filled with both hope and heartbreak. So now, prepare yourself. Let us step into that extraordinary era filled with conflict, ambition, vision, turmoil, and transformation. Let us journey into the life of Lyndon B. Johnson. I was born on August 27, 1908, in a place that many Americans would struggle to find on a map, a stretch of land in the Texas Hill Country, dotted with cedar trees, limestone rocks, and endless skies. My earliest memories are not of comfort or abundance, but of dust settling on wooden floors, the smell of wet earth after a rare rainfall, and the quiet determination etched into the faces of the adults around me. My family was not wealthy. Far from it. We lived close to the land, close to hardship, and close to the fragile line that separated stability from uncertainty. Poverty wasn't an abstract word. It was the reality that shaped what we ate, how we worked, and the choices we made day after day. Yet in that world of scarcity, there was also something else, an unspoken resilience, a sense that life demanded you stand up even when you had nothing left in your hands. My father, Sam Ely Johnson Jr., was a man of ideals. He served in the Texas legislature and believed in public service, even when it brought him more trouble than reward. I watched him rise and fall, praised in one season, criticized in the next. It taught me early that politics could be both noble and unforgiving. My mother, Rebecca, was a woman of education and culture, with a mind sharpened by books and a heart softened by compassion. She gave me something invaluable, the belief that words mattered and that learning could lift a person far beyond the boundaries of birth. But life on our land was never easy. I remember mornings when the sun rose red over the horizon, signaling another scorching day of work. I remember the sound of wind whistling through the cracks in our walls. I remember neighbors who struggled just to keep food on the table, families for whom one failed crop could mean ruin. There were moments of joy, too, moments carved out between the hardships. Running barefoot through the fields, listening to my mother read stories under the dim glow of an oil lamp, watching thunderstorms roll across the hills with a kind of awe that only a child can feel. Those experiences shaped my understanding of America, not as a grand idea first, but as a collection of real people, living real lives, fighting real battles just to survive. As I grew older, I began to see the larger forces at play around me. The hill country was filled with inequality, economic, racial, and educational. Some families, usually white and connected, had opportunities. Others had none. And Mexican-American children, whom I later taught, lived in conditions harsher than anything I could have imagined as a boy. That I saw how a lack of access to schools, to healthcare, to stable wages, limited entire communities. I came to understand that poverty was not simply a matter of personal failure. It was built into the structures surrounding us. This realization would stay with me all my life and would later guide many of the initiatives I fought for. But in those early days, my concerns were far more immediate. I wanted to escape poverty. I wanted to be somebody. And I felt a restless energy inside me, a sense that life held something bigger if I could just find my way toward it. Still, leaving the hill country wasn't easy. I worked long hours, took on every odd job I could find, and pushed myself through school with more determination than talent. My father's financial troubles weighed heavily on us. There were times when we nearly lost everything, and the shame of those experiences left deep marks on me. I never forgot what it felt like to see bills piling up, to hear hushed conversations late at night, to watch adults hide their worries so the children wouldn't see. Those memories stayed with me years later when I made decisions about poverty programs, rural electrification, and education. I knew what it felt like to fear the future. Yet despite everything, the hill country gave me something no city could have offered: grit, a sense of closeness to people, in understanding of what hardship meant, not in theory, but in lived experience. By the time I was a teenager, I had learned that if I wanted to change my life, I would have to push harder than those around me. I became outspoken, sometimes too outspoken, driven, ambitious, and hungry for opportunity. I sought leadership roles in school, argued loudly about fairness, and found myself instinctively drawn toward influencing others. One moment in particular remains etched in my mind, a moment that, in many ways, marked the beginning of the rest of my life. I was still just a boy, watching a group of Mexican-American children being separated from the others, given broken-down textbooks, and taught in a rundown classroom. They weren't treated as equals. They weren't even treated as children with promise, and something inside me tightened, a recognition that this was wrong, deeply wrong. That memory would rise again years later when I fought for the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. But at the time, it was simply a boy's realization that injustice was real. By the time I left home in search of an education, I carried with me the hill country's unyielding lessons: that poverty steals potential, that inequality destroys dignity, and that leadership, true leadership, means fighting not for the powerful, but for those who can't fight for themselves. When I first stepped into Washington as a young congressman from Texas, I carried with me more than ambition. I carried the hopes of the hill country families who believed I could bring their struggles to the halls of power. I still remember the sensation of walking through those grand corridors of the Capitol for the first time. The polished marble floors, the echo of hurried footsteps, the distant murmur of debates shaping the direction of the nation. Everything felt larger than life. Yet I was determined not to be lost in the noise. That I told myself that if I was going to survive in Washington, I wouldn't do it quietly. I would study every inch of the system, understand every rule, know every player, and learn how to move through the machinery of Congress with purpose. And so that is what I did. Day after day, I arrived before most others, and I left long after the corridors had fallen silent. I spoke to everyone: the clerks, the messengers, the old-timers who knew the secrets of the Capitol better than the politicians who served there. Every handshake was a lesson. Every conversation a chance to learn something new. It wasn't long before I realized that legislative power didn't simply fall into the hands of those who waited. It was something you seized, carefully, strategically, and with absolute determination. I watched powerful committee chairs exert influence with a nod or a raised eyebrow. I observed the quiet alliances that moved bills forward and the subtle pressures that brought debates to a halt. Bit by bit, I began to understand how real power operated. Texas had taught me how to read people, who spoke straight, who hesitated, who talked big but delivered little. In Washington, those instincts became my compass. I learned how to build alliances that mattered. I learned how to make promises I intended to keep. And perhaps most importantly, I learned how to persuade, not by shouting, but by understanding what others needed, what they feared, and what they dreamed of. As the years passed, I became known for my tireless work ethic and my relentless pursuit of results. I pushed for education, rural electrification, and infrastructure, issues that mattered deeply to the people back home. And though the halls of Congress were filled with polished statesmen and fierce debaters, I discovered that sincerity and persistence could often open more doors than eloquence alone. But Washington was not just a place of opportunity, it was a battleground. Political factions clashed constantly, each fighting to shape the identity of the nation. I found myself navigating storms of ideology, ambition, and ego. There were days when progress seemed impossible, when partisan lines hardened like stone. Yet even in those moments, I refused to be discouraged. I had come too far to retreat. Slowly, steadily, I built my reputation. I became someone others sought out when they needed something accomplished, someone who didn't just talk about change, but made it happen. Behind closed doors, I negotiated. In committee rooms, I scrutinized every line of legislation. On the House floor, I made sure my voice was heard when it mattered most. Those years shaped me. They taught me that leadership isn't granted. It is earned through sweat, patience, and the willingness to do the work others avoid. And as my influence grew, so too did my understanding of the nation, its challenges, its divisions, its limitless potential. That I did not yet know the path ahead, how far it would take me, how many battles I would face, or how heavy the responsibilities of leadership would one day become. But standing in those early years of my Washington journey, I felt a fire inside me. I was no longer the schoolteacher from Cutula or the young man searching for direction. I was a congressman of the United States, ready to make my mark, and this was only the beginning. When I left the dusty classrooms of Cutula, I carried more than memories. I carried a mission. I had seen what poverty did to children, what hopelessness did to families, and what a lack of opportunity did to entire communities. Those years formed a conviction inside me. If I wanted to create real change, I needed more than good intentions. I needed a position where I could shape laws, resources, and priorities. I needed political power. My first real step into that world came in 1931, when I secured a job as a congressional aide to Congressman Richard Clayburgh of Texas. I was only 22, young, ambitious, eager, and a little scared, though I would never have admitted that at the time. Washington, D.C. felt like another planet compared to the Texas Hill Country. The marble buildings, the crowded offices, the sound of typewriters echoing down hallways. It all pulsed with an energy I had never felt before. Working for Clayburgh taught me the mechanics of politics. I learned how offices functioned, how deals were made, how favors were exchanged, and how relationships, more than ideology, moved Washington forward. I studied everyone. The secretaries who knew every secret, the committee chairs who controlled legislation, the reporters who shaped public opinion. I watched how leaders commanded attention with a gesture, a whisper, or a well-timed phone call. Washington wasn't a classroom, but it was certainly an education. By 1935, President Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed me as the director of the Texas National Youth Administration. I was only 26. My job was to help young people find work, education, and purpose during the Great Depression. It was one of the greatest responsibilities I had ever held, and I took it with a seriousness that surprised even myself. Traveling across Texas, I met families living in tents, teenagers searching for food, young men wandering dusty roads with nothing but determination keeping them moving. I approved projects that built schools, parks, and roads. I sent young people to training programs that gave them skills and hope. For the first time, I saw up close how government could change lives when it chose to act boldly. And I also learned another truth. To create change, you have to fight for it. You have to face resistance, push through bureaucracy, and sometimes bend, though never break. The rules that stand in your way. In 1937, an opportunity appeared that changed the course of my life. A congressional seat in Texas opened unexpectedly. I saw my chance, and I took it. The campaign was fierce, sweating through the August heat, traveling across rural towns, shaking hands with farmers, teachers, ranchers, laborers, people who reminded me of the faces I had known all my life. That I talked about the New Deal, about jobs, roads, schools, and dignity. I talked about the America I wanted to build, one where a child's future wasn't determined by their birthplace or their parents' income. I campaigned with everything I had. And at 28 years old, I entered the U.S. Congress. Walking into the House of Representatives for the first time felt like stepping into history itself. The chamber was alive with debate, loud, passionate, determined. As a new congressman, I had no seniority, no influence, and no special treatment. But I had something else: relentless drive. I worked long hours, made alliances quickly, and studied every rule, every procedure, every path to power. That I watched how President Roosevelt navigated crises. I admired his boldness, the way he lifted the nation out of despair. FDR believed that government must serve its people, and his vision became a guiding force in my own political philosophy. That I wanted to be more than a participant, that I wanted to shape the direction of the country. During my years in the House, I pushed for rural electrification, education funding, public works, and veterans support. My speeches were not long, but they were sharp. My negotiations were purposeful, and slowly, people began to notice me, not because I was loud, but because I got things done. Then came World War II. America was changing rapidly, and so was my role. I visited bases, spoke with soldiers, listened to commanders, and witnessed firsthand the demands of global conflict. I also made a controversial decision. I joined the Navy Reserves and insisted on going overseas to observe the war myself. Some said it was a political stunt, but they didn't see what I saw: fear, courage, confusion, and sacrifice etched into the faces of young men not much younger than my former students. That experience taught me the true cost of sending American soldiers into danger. It was a lesson I carried heavily during the Vietnam years. By the end of the war, I was ready for the next step. The House could only take me so far. I wanted a position where I could influence national policy more directly. In 1948, I launched my campaign for the U.S. Senate. It became one of the most contentious races in Texas history. The fight was brutal, full of accusations, dramatic reversals, and razor-thin margins. To this day, people still talk about Box 13, the ballot dispute that nearly cost me the election. Some claim the results were questionable. Others insist the votes were legitimate. What I know is this: I fought with every bit of strength and strategy one possessed, and when the dust settled, I was declared the winner by just 87 votes that changed American history. Becoming a senator transformed my political world. The Senate was slower, more deliberate, and far more ruled by hierarchy than the House. But once again, I studied the system, mastered its rhythms, and found ways to move legislation when others were stalled. I forged alliances with powerful figures, and I paid close attention to the Southern Bloc, the group of senators who dominated committee chairs and controlled legislative flow. That I learned one of the most important lessons of my career. If you want to lead in the Senate, you must understand people, their ambitions, their fears, their pride, their needs. By the early 1950s, I was rising quickly, preparing for roles far greater than anything I had imagined when I first left Texas. What started as a young man's ambition was slowly becoming a path toward national leadership, a path that would eventually take me to the height of American power and into the heart of some of the greatest challenges the nation would ever face. When I first stepped into the United States Senate, I understood immediately that I was entering a different world, one ruled not only by laws and procedures, but by personalities, alliances, and the delicate balance of tradition and ambition. The House had taught me discipline. The Senate would teach me mastery. I still remember the feeling of walking across the Senate floor for the first time. The chamber was quieter than the House, but the silence carried weight, an invisible pressure that reminded you that every word spoken there became part of the nation's record. In the Senate, a single speech could sway history. A single objection could halt legislation. It was a place where voices carried deep echoes, but I did not arrive simply to observe. I arrived to understand how power moved, who held it, how they used it, and how I could make it a tool for the people I represented. Very quickly, I realized that influence in the Senate was not won with loud speeches or grandstanding. It was earned through relationships, carefully cultivated and genuinely maintained. I spent countless hours walking from office to office, listening more than I spoke, learning what each senator valued and what they feared losing. Some cared deeply about defense, others about agriculture, education, civil rights, or the needs of their states. By understanding their motivations, I could find common ground even where disagreements seemed insurmountable. Those early months were a test of patience. Many senators had served for decades, and I was a newcomer, a young man from Texas with bold ideas and an even bolder drive. Some welcomed me. Others watched from a distance, waiting to see if I would stumble. I was determined not to. I studied the Senate rules until I could recite them in my sleep. I learned how to navigate the maze of committees, motions, and procedural tactics. And slowly, I began to build a reputation, reliable, persistent, and fiercely committed to getting results. The defining moment of my early Senate career came when I secured a seat on the Armed Services Committee. That committee was a gateway to national influence, and I knew it. The Cold War was reshaping global politics, and America's role in the world was expanding rapidly. On that committee, decisions were made that affected not only soldiers and budgets, but the entire future of American power. I threw myself into the work, meeting with generals, studying defense reports, traveling to military bases, and engaging in long discussions with experts. I understood that if I was going to shape national policy, I needed to know every detail. And in a time when the world stood on edge, knowledge was a form of strength. It wasn't only defense policy that shaped my Senate years. I also pushed for public education, rural development, and infrastructure, issues I had championed in the House, but now had the authority to influence on a far greater scale. I fought for funding for teachers, schools, hospitals, and the communities that had been overlooked for too long. Every victory, no matter how small, felt like proof that the system could work for the people when guided with conviction, but power in the Senate came with challenges. I often found myself navigating political storms so fierce they made earlier battles seem like minor quarrels. Party divisions deepened, ideological lines hardened, and every major bill became a test of endurance. There were nights when I left the Capitol long after midnight, exhausted but unwilling to give in. Persistence, I learned, mattered as much as strategy. One of the most profound skills I learned in those years was something people would later call the Johnson treatment. It wasn't a tactic I invented intentionally. It was simply my way of persuading. When I believed in something, I threw my entire being into the argument. I stood close enough that no one could ignore my presence, spoke with such conviction that hesitation seemed unreasonable, and listened so carefully that others felt their concerns truly mattered. I used humor, pressure, empathy, whatever was necessary to build consensus. Some called it forceful. Others called it effective. I simply called it doing my job. As time went on, I rose through the ranks. I became party whip, a role that demanded precision and trust. I counted votes, managed negotiations, and ensured that when the Senate acted, it did so deliberately and cohesively. It was a role that taught me how fragile unity could be and how vital it was to preserve it. Behind the scenes, I built alliances across party lines. I knew that America was too large, too diverse, and too complex for progress to belong to just one side. If we were going to build a better nation, we needed cooperation, not division. And though I did not win every battle, each struggle strengthened my understanding of leadership. That I watched presidents wrestle with national crises and saw firsthand how the weight of their decisions shaped our future. I studied their strengths and weaknesses. I listened to their advisors. And in quiet moments, I asked myself what I would do if the mantle of leadership ever fell upon me. By the time I became Senate Majority Leader, I had transformed from a young congressman filled with ambition into a national figure capable of steering the legislative direction of the United States. The Senate had not been an easy arena, but it was the one that forged my identity as a leader. Looking back, those years were some of the most demanding and most defining of my life. I learned how to command a room, how to build consensus where none seemed possible, and how to move the vast machinery of government when urgency demanded it. The Senate taught me the true nature of power, not as an instrument of personal ambition, but as a responsibility, one that required clarity, courage, and an unwavering commitment to the people whose voices too often went unheard. When I reflect on my rise to the position of Senate Majority Leader, it becomes clear that nothing about it was accidental. Every handshake, every late-night negotiation, every quiet conversation in hidden corners of the Capitol, they were all part of a long journey toward a role that demanded every ounce of discipline, intuition, and determination I possessed. Before I became Majority Leader, I served as the Democratic Whip, a position that placed me squarely in the engine room of the Senate's operations. I was responsible for counting votes, assessing loyalties, and predicting outcomes before they occurred. I learned which senators responded to logic, which to emotion, which to loyalty, and which to fear. Some needed encouragement, others needed pressure. Most needed both. The Senate was a living organism, and as whip, I learned how to keep it breathing. But the job of whip was only a prelude. I knew that if I wanted to truly guide the direction of national policy, I had to set my sights on the majority leadership. It wasn't ambition alone that pushed me. It was the belief that I could make the institution work at a time when the nation needed unity, clarity, and strength. When the moment finally came, and I ascended to the position of Majority Leader, I felt the weight of history settle across my shoulders. I understood instantly what the role required. Not only command, but vision. Not only strategy, but unshakable focus. The Senate had witnessed strong leaders before me, and I was determined to stand among them. From the moment I assumed the position, my days followed a relentless rhythm. Dawn to dusk, and often far into the night, I met with senators from both parties, committee chairs, aides, lobbyists, and experts. Every decision passed through my office. Every major bill touched my desk. If the Senate was the heart of American legislation, I had become its pulse point. One of my earliest priorities as Majority Leader was to strengthen the party's cohesion. Political divisions were growing, both within the Democratic Party and across the aisle. Some senators preferred caution, others demanded bold action. My job was to bridge those differences, to turn individual voices into a collective force capable of passing meaningful legislation. This required a unique combination of persuasion, patience, and pressure, tools I had refined for years. Some negotiations lasted minutes. Others stretched for days, with tempers flaring and frustrations rising. I became the mediator, the strategist, the listener, and the enforcer. I learned when to compromise and when to hold firm. I learned when to make promises and when to remind colleagues of the consequences of inaction. Those were intense years, but profoundly productive ones. Under my leadership, the Senate tackled issues of national defense, economic development, public education, and civil rights. We passed bills that strengthened American infrastructure, expanded opportunities for families, and reinforced the nation's military readiness in an uncertain world. But the Senate was not only about policy, it was also about power. And to wield power effectively, a leader had to understand every aspect of the institution. The committee system, the parliamentary rules, the delicate hierarchy of relationships, and the unwritten traditions that carried as much weight as the written ones. That I studied these elements the way a general studies a battlefield. That I learned where resistance was strongest, where alliances formed naturally, where a single senator could derail months of progress with a well-timed objection, and where opportunities existed to turn near defeat into sweeping victory. That knowledge became one of my greatest strengths. One of the most defining aspects of my leadership was my insistence on discipline. I expected senators in my party to show up, to stay informed, to vote when votes mattered, and to support the broader mission, even when individual preferences conflicted with the collective purpose. Some called my methods forceful. Others called them uncompromising. I called them necessary. The Senate could not function on half-hearted commitment, but leadership was not only exercised in public. Much of the work happened behind closed doors, in private meetings that stretched into the early morning hours. I often sat across from senators who felt overlooked, misunderstood, or unsupported. I listened to their concerns, their fears, their hopes for their states. And I reminded them that their voice mattered, that together we could achieve victories that none of us could accomplish alone. Through those conversations, I gained a deeper understanding of the Senate's human side. Beneath the speeches and procedures were men and women with families, responsibilities, and pressures that the public rarely saw. By acknowledging that humanity, I forged bonds that proved invaluable when critical moments arrived. Of course, leadership brought its share of challenges. There were intense political battles, some so fierce that they threatened to break apart carefully built alliances. There were days when the weight of the Senate's expectations felt overwhelming, and there were moments when the nation itself seemed uncertain of its direction. But I never allowed doubt to dictate my actions. I believed in the institution. I believed in its potential. And I believed that strong leadership, firm, clear, and resolute, was essential for progress. During these years, I also developed a deeper philosophy about power. I came to understand that power, in its purest form, was not about personal glory. It was about the ability to solve problems, to lift burdens, to improve lives. True power was responsibility, and responsibility demanded results. As majority leader, I gained a national profile. Presidents sought my counsel. Journalists analyzed my every move. Observers described me as one of the most effective leaders the Senate had ever seen. But what mattered most to me were the outcomes we achieved and the path we cleared for future progress. Those years in leadership defined the core of who I became. They taught me how to build compromise where division threatened to overwhelm. They taught me how to seize opportunities before they vanished. And they taught me how to move the nation forward, step by step. Even when the road ahead was steep, that I didn't know it then, but everything I learned, as whip, as leader, as negotiator, as strategist, was preparing me for a moment that would change my life and the course of the nation. A moment of unimaginable tragedy and sudden responsibility. A moment when the leadership skills forged in the Senate would be tested on a scale I had never before imagined. By the early 1960s, I had spent decades learning the ways of Washington. I had walked every corridor of power, negotiated countless deals, and built alliances that spanned the political spectrum. But even with all that experience, nothing could fully prepare me for what lay ahead. The office of the Vice President of the United States. When John F. Kennedy announced his candidacy for the presidency in 1960, I watched closely. I admired his charisma, his vision, and his ability to inspire millions. Yet I also understood that politics was as much about relationships, strategy, and timing as it was about charm. I began to consider where I might fit into this new administration and how I could continue to influence the nation I had devoted my life to serving. The campaign itself was an intense, grueling exercise in both endurance and strategy. Traveling across the country, shaking hands, attending rallies, speaking to thousands, I saw the United States in all its complexity. Booming cities, struggling rural towns, communities marginalized and overlooked, and citizens hungry for change. Every handshake, every conversation, every moment on the campaign trail reminded me why I had entered public service in the first place. To help the people whose voices were too often ignored. When Kennedy approached me to join the ticket as his running mate, I understood the magnitude of the opportunity and the responsibility it carried. I also understood the skepticism I faced. Many critics questioned whether a Southern senator could complement a young, energetic Northeastern senator. Some doubted my ability to work in tandem with Kennedy's team or to navigate the challenges that awaited in the executive branch. But I believed in my experience, in my knowledge of Congress, and in the value I could bring to the partnership. Taking on the vice presidency required a shift in perspective. In the Senate, I was accustomed to being a leader, to commanding the floor, and to shaping legislation directly. As vice president, I would be in a supportive role, often constrained by tradition and the limited constitutional powers of the office. I knew that to be effective, I would need to adapt, learning when to push, when to advise quietly, and when to act decisively behind the scenes. That I immersed myself in the executive branch, familiarizing myself with the administration's priorities, learning the nuances of foreign policy, domestic initiatives, and economic planning. I spent hours with Kennedy and his advisors, studying every briefing, every proposal, every contingency plan. I knew that being vice president was more than a title. It was a position of influence, sometimes subtle but always consequential. During this period, I also traveled extensively, both domestically and abroad. I observed the civil rights struggle firsthand, met with community leaders, and witnessed the social tensions that were reshaping the nation. I saw the necessity of policy that balanced moral conviction with political pragmatism, and I began to refine my approach to governance on a national scale. One of the most challenging aspects of my vice presidency was managing relationships, both within the administration and with Congress. As a former senator, I understood the value of maintaining alliances, negotiating compromises, and anticipating resistance. I used these skills daily, advocating for legislation, smoothing tensions, and ensuring that Kennedy's vision could move forward despite the inevitable obstacles. Of course, the period was also marked by unforeseen crises. From global tensions in the Cold War to domestic unrest, the pace was relentless. Decisions were urgent, stakes were high, and errors could have profound consequences. I learned early that leadership was not just about policy or ideology. It was about judgment under pressure, clarity in moments of uncertainty, and the ability to act decisively when circumstances demanded it. Throughout this time, I reflected constantly on the lessons I had learned in the Senate: persistence, negotiation, understanding human motivation, and the willingness to confront challenges directly. These lessons were now being tested on a broader stage, where outcomes affected millions of lives rather than a few constituents or a single state. I stood beside President Kennedy. Traveling the country and engaging with leaders around the world, I felt both the exhilaration and the weight of the office. The vice presidency was often misunderstood, but I approached it as an opportunity to prepare, to learn, and to position myself to serve the nation more effectively in the years to come. Looking back, those months as vice president were transformative. They marked the transition from legislative leadership to executive responsibility, from influence within a chamber to influence across the nation. They tested my skills, my judgment, and my ability to operate under pressure, and they prepared me for the unimaginable events that would soon alter the course of my life and the history of the United States. Serving as vice president was a study in contrasts. The office itself carried ceremonial duties, public appearances, and a constant presence in the national spotlight. Yet much of the real work occurred quietly, behind closed doors, in strategy sessions, intense conversations with senators, governors, and foreign dignitaries. I quickly learned that influence often came not from grand speeches, but from subtle persuasion, strategic pressure, and the ability to anticipate how decisions would ripple through the nation. One of the most defining aspects of this period was observing President Kennedy at work. I admired his vision, his eloquence, and his capacity to inspire hope. But I also recognized the burdens he carried, the endless decisions, the political compromises, the international crises that came without warning. By standing close, by listening, advising, and sometimes challenging, I learned the delicate art of executive leadership. I began to see how policy, politics, and personality intertwined in ways that determined the fate of millions. Home in the United States, tensions were rising. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum, demanding change and justice, and challenging long-held social structures. I traveled extensively, visiting communities in the South and witnessing firsthand the courage of those fighting for equality, as well as the resistance and hostility they faced. It was a profound education, showing me the moral and political stakes of leadership in a rapidly changing society. I realized that progress required not only vision but tactical skill, patience, and a willingness to confront entrenched interests. Internationally, the Cold War dominated every decision. Crises in Cuba, Berlin, and Southeast Asia demanded constant attention, analysis, and quick judgment. I was present for many of these discussions, observing debates, learning the art of negotiation, and understanding how the balance of power could be maintained without plunging the world into conflict. These experiences reinforced lessons I had learned in the Senate. Preparation, patience, and the ability to act decisively under pressure were essential. My work as vice president also brought me into the complex machinery of domestic policy. I engaged with programs designed to improve education, expand healthcare, and provide opportunity to those marginalized by poverty. I met with governors, educators, and community leaders to understand the real effects of legislation on American lives. Every visit, every conversation, every report deepened my understanding of governance and my sense of responsibility for the outcomes of our decisions. The role demanded constant adaptation. Unlike my years in Congress, where I had direct control over legislation, the executive branch required influence through persuasion and coalition building. I learned to navigate the tensions between ambition and humility, public expectation and private strategy. I honed my ability to listen, to advise without imposing, and to prepare for moments when circumstances demanded bold action. Perhaps the most critical lessons came in times of crisis. During these years, I witnessed tragedies, political upheavals, and moments of national anxiety that tested the limits of leadership. I learned that in these moments, clarity, courage, and a steady hand were more important than ideology or rhetoric. Decisions had to be made quickly, but with careful consideration of their consequences for the country and the world. Through it all, I continued to reflect on my own path, the lessons from the Texas Hill Country, from teaching, from Congress, and from the Senate. Each experience informed the way I approached this office. I learned to balance ambition with responsibility, strategy with principle, and action with foresight. Every encounter, every negotiation, every success and failure shaped the leader I was becoming. By the end of this period, I had transformed further. I was no longer simply a senator who had mastered the legislative process. I was a national figure, deeply engaged with both domestic and international affairs, with firsthand knowledge of the weight of executive power. I understood the immense responsibilities that awaited a president, and I began to prepare myself, not only to support the administration, but to serve the nation in a role that might one day demand everything I had learned and more. The vice presidency, often underestimated by outsiders, had been a rigorous training ground. It had honed my judgment, deepened my understanding of the country's needs, and taught me the intricacies of power at the highest levels. And as the world watched the Kennedy administration unfold, I knew that history had a way of testing even the most prepared leaders, and that the lessons of these years would soon be required in ways I could scarcely imagine. As vice president, I had learned that leadership was measured not in applause or headlines, but in decisions made under pressure. The office demanded constant vigilance, relentless preparation, and an acute awareness of the consequences of every action. I saw firsthand how even small decisions could reverberate across the nation, affecting lives in ways that were both immediate and long-lasting. One of the most profound lessons of this period was the importance of presence, physical, mental, and emotional. Being vice president was more than a title. It was a commitment to anticipate problems, to listen carefully, and to advise decisively when the nation faced uncertainty. I traveled constantly, meeting with leaders, visiting communities, and observing the real impact of policy. Each trip reinforced the lesson that governance was not an abstraction. It was about the people whose futures depended on our choices. Crises, both domestic and international, tested every skill I had developed over decades. From civil rights tensions to Cold War confrontations, the stakes were enormous. I saw how the president handled threats to national security, how advisors debated options with intensity, and how public perception could sway the course of policy. In those moments, I realized that preparedness and clarity of judgment were as important as courage itself. At home, the civil rights movement challenged long-standing social structures, compelling the nation to confront injustice and inequality. I met with leaders, listened to their experiences, and considered the complex political and moral factors at play. I began to understand that leadership required a delicate balance, advancing progress while managing resistance, addressing urgent demands while crafting sustainable solutions, and doing so with a conscience grounded in fairness and responsibility. Internationally, the Cold War created a constant backdrop of tension. From Europe to Asia, the threat of conflict loomed, demanding careful diplomacy and strategic foresight. I attended meetings, reviewed intelligence reports, and observed the interplay of national and global interests. I learned that decisions could not be made impulsively, yet hesitation could be equally dangerous. The vice presidency offered a unique vantage point to study the mechanisms of executive action and the complexities of international diplomacy. During this period, I also refined my approach to negotiation and persuasion. Influence was not about coercion. It was about understanding the priorities, fears, and motivations of others, and then guiding them toward decisions that aligned with broader objectives. I listened more than I spoke, observed more than I acted, and intervened when timing and circumstances demanded it. In doing so, I built trust, strengthened alliances, and shaped outcomes quietly but effectively. The office also reinforced a fundamental truth: the weight of responsibility is constant. Every conversation, every decision, every recommendation carries consequences. Leaders are judged not only by their victories, but by their ability to anticipate challenges, mitigate risks, and remain steady under pressure. This understanding became the foundation of my philosophy on leadership: service before self, preparation before impulse, and action guided by principle. By the end of my vice presidency, I had grown into a leader ready for the unexpected. I had learned to navigate both the public and private dimensions of governance, to anticipate crises before they erupted, and to act decisively when required. I had seen how the machinery of government functioned, and I understood how to operate within it while remaining true to a vision of national progress. These years were a crucible, shaping not only my skills, but my character. They tested my patience, refined my judgment, and deepened my understanding of what it meant to serve the American people at the highest level. Every experience, every challenge, and every victory prepared me for the moment when history would demand more than preparation. It would demand leadership, courage, and a readiness to bear the weight of the nation's trust. And as the administration progressed, it became clear that the lessons I had learned in the Senate and as vice president would soon be required in ways that were unimaginable. The stage was set for events that would define not only the trajectory of my life, but the destiny of the United States itself. As the months of the Kennedy administration unfolded, I found myself reflecting deeply on the trajectory of my career and the path that had brought me to the threshold of history. The vice presidency, often underestimated by observers, had proven to be an invaluable preparation for the weight of national leadership. I had studied the machinery of government, navigated the complexities of Congress, and observed the highest levels of executive decision-making. Yet I knew that the ultimate test was not in preparation alone. It would come when unforeseen events demanded judgment, courage, and action beyond any plan or expectation. The domestic landscape was evolving rapidly. Civil rights tensions continued to escalate, requiring both moral clarity and political skill. I traveled across the nation, visiting communities where inequality and injustice had persisted for generations. I met with leaders and citizens alike, listening to their struggles and aspirations. These experiences were profound reminders that leadership is about more than legislation or speeches. It is about the tangible impact of policy on human lives. Internationally, the world remained fraught with tension. The Cold War cast a shadow over every decision, from Europe to Asia to the Western Hemisphere. Diplomatic crises emerged with alarming frequency, demanding constant attention and strategic foresight. I observed how President Kennedy managed these challenges, balancing resolve with diplomacy, principle with pragmatism. From these lessons, I absorbed the importance of patience, preparation, and decisiveness in the highest office. During this period, I also became increasingly involved in key policy discussions, offering counsel and perspective rooted in decades of legislative and executive experience. I studied every briefing, examined every proposal, and anticipated every potential consequence. I understood that the vice presidency was not merely ceremonial. It was a position of influence, responsibility, and preparation for the unforeseen demands of history that I reflected frequently on the lessons I had learned from my early life in Texas, from teaching, from Congress, and from the Senate. Each experience had shaped my understanding of people, power, and responsibility. I knew that leadership required empathy and toughness in equal measure. It required the ability to act decisively while remaining attuned to the consequences of every decision. These were not abstract lessons. They were practical tools that would be tested in the months and years to come. As I traveled, advised, and observed, I also sensed a growing urgency. History often moves in unpredictable ways, and leaders are judged not by preparation alone, but by the clarity and courage of their actions when the unexpected arrives. I began to anticipate the challenges that might fall upon the administration and, eventually, upon myself. The world was changing rapidly, and the nation's expectations were high. Even in moments of reflection, I never lost sight of the people I served. Every law, every policy, every negotiation was ultimately about their lives, their families, their communities, their hopes for a better future. That perspective grounded me, reminding me that power is not an end in itself, but a responsibility entrusted by those we serve. Looking back on these months, I recognize that they were a critical period of preparation, reflection, and anticipation. They were the culmination of decades of experience, a period in which I honed my judgment, refined my understanding of leadership, and strengthened my resolve to serve the nation at the highest level. Every challenge I faced, every decision I made, and every observation I absorbed laid the foundation for the historic responsibilities that were soon to arrive. These months were both a closing chapter and a threshold, marking the end of one stage of public service and the beginning of another, where history would demand leadership in ways that were unprecedented, urgent, and profoundly consequential. The day I assumed the presidency is etched in my memory with a clarity that time cannot diminish. Standing on the steps of the Capitol, I felt the weight of history pressing upon me, mingled with the solemn responsibility of the office. Every president before me had carried the burdens of leadership, but none could fully prepare a man for the unique challenges awaiting him. In that moment, I understood that the oath I was about to take was not merely words. It was a covenant with the nation and its people. As I recited the oath, I felt the gravity of the task ahead. The country faced profound challenges, civil rights tensions that threatened to tear communities apart, an economy teetering on the edge of uncertainty, and a world in which Cold War rivalries demanded constant vigilance and strategic foresight. I knew that leadership would require not only intellect and experience, but courage, resolve, and an unshakable commitment to the American people. The early days of the presidency were both exhilarating and sobering. I was thrust into the center of decision-making that would affect millions, with advisors offering conflicting counsel, experts presenting complex analyses, and the press scrutinizing every move. It was a delicate balance, acting decisively while listening carefully, asserting authority while fostering collaboration, and maintaining vision while responding to immediate crises. One of my first priorities was to establish a strong team. I selected individuals who combined expertise with integrity, judgment with adaptability. I knew that no president could act alone. Effective governance depends on capable advisors who can challenge, support, and execute decisions with precision. In every appointment, every consultation, I sought to build a team capable of facing the unpredictable and the unprecedented. Domestic challenges demanded immediate attention. Civil rights were at the forefront of national consciousness. I met with leaders, activists, and local officials to understand the complexities of a nation struggling to reconcile its ideals with reality. I realized that meaningful progress required both moral courage and strategic planning. Legislation alone would not suffice. It had to be accompanied by leadership that could inspire compliance, persuade skeptics, and mobilize the nation's conscience. Simultaneously, I faced international pressures that required constant vigilance. From the escalating Cold War to emerging conflicts around the globe, every decision had ramifications far beyond our borders. I met with foreign leaders, reviewed intelligence, and considered the global consequences of domestic policy. The presidency demanded a capacity to think in multiple dimensions: immediate, long-term, national, and international. Every choice carried weight, and every misstep could reverberate around the world. Despite these pressures, I found strength in the lessons of my previous roles. My years in the Senate and as vice president had taught me patience, negotiation, and the value of preparation. I relied on these lessons daily, using them to guide decisions, anticipate challenges, and build consensus among those whose cooperation was essential. Leadership, I had learned, is as much about influence and understanding as it is about authority. That I also understood the importance of connection with the American people. Leadership cannot exist in isolation. Every speech, every public appearance, every moment in which I engaged directly with citizens was an opportunity to communicate not just policy, but vision, hope, and reassurance. I worked to ensure that the voice of the presidency reflected both the ideals and the practical needs of the nation. As the days turned into weeks, I became increasingly aware of the immense responsibility resting on my shoulders. The presidency is not an abstract office. It is a living, breathing role that requires constant vigilance, unwavering judgment, and the capacity to act decisively in moments of crisis. I knew that every decision, every action, and every word carried consequences that could affect generations. Through it all, I held fast to a guiding principle: that leadership is ultimately about service. Power is not an end. It is a means to improve the lives of the people entrusted to your care. With this in mind, I approached every challenge with determination, thoughtfulness, and an unyielding commitment to the nation's welfare. These early months of the presidency were both a culmination and a beginning. They represented the realization of decades of preparation, yet also the start of a journey that would demand resilience, courage, and vision beyond anything I had experienced before. The nation looked to me for guidance, reassurance, and action, and I knew that the path ahead would test every skill, every judgment, and every lesson I had learned. And so I stepped forward, conscious of the weight of history, committed to the responsibilities of leadership, and determined to serve the United States with every ounce of experience, judgment, and resolve I possessed. The first months of my presidency were a whirlwind of decisions, negotiations, and constant observation. Every day brought new challenges, domestic unrest, international crises, and the pressures of managing a government with millions of moving parts. There were moments when the weight of responsibility felt almost unbearable, yet I reminded myself that leadership is forged in the crucible of pressure and uncertainty. One of my earliest priorities was addressing the civil rights crisis that gripped the nation. The movement for equality had grown increasingly vocal and uncompromising, demanding not only legislative action but moral leadership from the presidency. I met with civil rights leaders, state officials, and local communities to understand the depth of the issues and the possible paths forward. I realized that meaningful change required a combination of courage, patience, and strategic action. Legislation alone was never enough. It had to be accompanied by political will and public persuasion. I worked closely with Congress to craft policies that could pass through the complex legislative process, all while ensuring that they reflected the nation's ideals and met the pressing demands for justice. Balancing pragmatism with principle became a daily exercise, one that required careful judgment and relentless negotiation. Internationally, tensions escalated on multiple fronts. The Cold War created an atmosphere of constant vigilance. I was briefed daily on global developments, often making decisions with consequences that could reverberate across continents. Every conversation with foreign leaders demanded careful listening, astute analysis, and an understanding of how even minor actions could affect the delicate balance of power. Leadership, I learned anew, was as much about foresight as it was about immediate action. The presidency also required managing internal relationships. Cabinet members, advisors, and congressional allies each brought perspectives, ambitions, and agendas. My role was to coordinate, mediate, and, when necessary, assert authority. Influence was seldom about command alone. It was about persuasion, empathy, and timing. Decisions had to consider not only outcomes, but also the long-term cohesion of the administration and the party. Throughout this period, I also dedicated myself to understanding the American people in new and profound ways. I traveled extensively, visiting towns, cities, and rural areas, speaking directly with citizens, and observing firsthand the impact of policies on everyday life. These encounters grounded me, reminding me that leadership is ultimately about service, about understanding the real needs and aspirations of those we are entrusted to lead. Crises tested every skill I had acquired. From economic uncertainties to security threats, I learned to act decisively while considering the broader implications. The ability to remain calm, thoughtful, and strategic under pressure became one of the most vital aspects of leadership. Mistakes could not only compromise policy but also erode public trust, a lesson that shaped every action I took. Public communication also emerged as a critical tool. Speeches, addresses, and interviews were not merely vehicles for information. They were instruments for leadership, reassurance, and vision. Every word mattered. Every message shaped perception, influenced opinion, and reinforced the authority of the office. I took great care in crafting communications that were honest, compelling, and reflective of the nation's values. As the administration advanced, the responsibilities multiplied. Policies had to be implemented, crises managed, and alliances maintained. I found myself drawing constantly on my experience in the Senate, my time as vice president, and the lessons learned from decades of public service. Strategy, patience, and judgment were tested daily, and every challenge was an opportunity to strengthen the presidency's effectiveness. Through it all, I remained acutely aware of the broader implications of every decision. Leadership is not about immediate gratification or temporary victories. It is about shaping the course of the nation for the long term, anticipating challenges, and ensuring that actions taken today lay the groundwork for a stronger, more just, and more prosperous future. By the end of these early months, I had begun to solidify my approach as president. I understood that leadership required balancing principle with pragmatism, courage with wisdom, and decisiveness with consultation. Every success reinforced the lessons learned over decades, and every setback was a reminder that vigilance, preparation, and adaptability are the hallmarks of effective leadership. These months were formative, not only for the administration, but for my personal understanding of what it truly means to bear the responsibilities of the highest office in the land. And as the year unfolded, it became clear that the challenges ahead would demand the full measure of experience, judgment, and resolve that I had cultivated throughout my life in public service. As I moved deeper into the responsibilities of the presidency, it became increasingly clear that effective leadership required more than reaction to crises. It demanded vision, strategic planning, and the ability to anticipate challenges before they emerged. Every decision, every policy, and every interaction carried the weight of long-term consequences, shaping not just immediate outcomes, but the nation's trajectory for years to come. I began to focus on consolidating leadership within the administration. Building a cohesive team was essential. Cabinet members, advisors, and key congressional allies needed alignment around common goals, yet each brought their own perspectives, priorities, and ambitions. My task was to coordinate these voices, ensuring that decisions were informed, deliberate, and effective. I relied on years of experience in the Senate and as vice president to anticipate conflicts, mediate differences, and foster collaboration. Domestic policy remained a priority. Civil rights, education, healthcare, and economic growth all demanded careful attention. I understood that legislative success required not only drafting and advocacy, but also the ability to navigate political realities. I worked closely with Congress, negotiating compromises without sacrificing principle, and striving to advance policies that reflected both moral conviction and practical feasibility. International challenges persisted. The Cold War's shadow touched every decision, from military planning to diplomacy. I reviewed intelligence daily, consulted with advisors, and engaged in deliberations that required balancing caution with action. Global stability depended on measured leadership, the kind that could foresee consequences, weigh risks, and act decisively when necessary. It was a continual exercise in judgment, strategy, and restraint. Throughout this period, I also sought to connect with the American people in meaningful ways. Public engagement was not merely ceremonial. It was an opportunity to communicate vision, build trust, and reinforce confidence in the presidency. Every speech, every address, every visit was a chance to demonstrate commitment, empathy, and understanding. I took this responsibility seriously, knowing that leadership extends beyond policy into the realm of inspiration and reassurance. Strategic thinking became a daily necessity. The presidency is a chessboard with countless pieces, and every action can ripple across domestic and international spheres. I learned to anticipate consequences, prepare contingencies, and remain adaptable. Flexibility in approach, combined with steadfastness in principle, proved critical in navigating complex and often unpredictable situations. Crises, of course, continued to arise. From economic pressures to social unrest and geopolitical tensions, the challenges were relentless. Yet each test reinforced a central truth. Leadership is not about avoiding difficulty, but about meeting it with clarity, courage, and purpose. Every decision demanded careful consideration, yet timeliness was essential. Hesitation could be costly, but rashness even more so. During this period, I reflected frequently on the lessons learned throughout my career. From my early life in Texas to teaching, from the Senate to the vice presidency, every experience had prepared me to confront the responsibilities of the highest office. I drew upon these lessons constantly, applying judgment honed over decades, weighing both principle and practicality, and striving to act in the best interest of the nation. By the end of this fourth section, it was evident that leadership is a continuous process, an unending balance of vision, strategy, and responsiveness. The presidency demanded endurance, foresight, and moral clarity. It required the ability to inspire, the discipline to deliberate, and the courage to act decisively when circumstances demanded. As I looked forward, I understood that the path ahead would continue to test every skill, every decision, and every lesson learned. The nation's expectations were high, and the world's challenges were complex and ever-changing. Yet I felt prepared, grounded in experience, and resolute in my commitment to serve the American people with integrity, vision, and unwavering dedication. As the first year of my presidency unfolded, the immense responsibility of the office became ever more tangible. Every decision, whether domestic or international, carried profound consequences. I came to understand that the presidency is not measured by intention alone, but by the tangible effects of leadership, how policies shape lives, how actions influence history, and how the nation perceives its government. That I devoted significant time to understanding the American people, their hopes, struggles, and aspirations. Traveling across the country, meeting citizens from all walks of life, I witnessed firsthand the complexities of the nation I had pledged to serve. Rural towns faced economic uncertainty, urban centers grappled with social tension, and communities everywhere expressed both optimism and apprehension about the future. These encounters reinforced a vital principle. Effective leadership requires empathy as much as strategy. Civil rights remained a defining challenge. The movement had grown in momentum and urgency, compelling decisive action. I engaged in discussions with legislators, activists, and state leaders to craft policies that could advance justice while maintaining stability. I realized that change demanded both moral clarity and political acumen. One without the other would be insufficient. Leadership required navigating this delicate balance with patience, courage, and perseverance. International affairs presented an equally complex landscape. The Cold War dominated global interactions, and crises arose with alarming frequency. Every decision was scrutinized, every action weighed against potential global repercussions. I consulted closely with advisors, analyzed intelligence reports, and considered multiple scenarios before acting. The stakes were immense. A single miscalculation could affect countless lives and shift the balance of power. These experiences underscored the necessity of careful judgment, foresight, and measured action. Managing the internal dynamics of the administration was another critical aspect. Cabinet members and advisors brought expertise, ambition, and perspectives that sometimes conflicted. My responsibility was to coordinate, mediate, and ensure alignment with overarching objectives. Influence came not merely from authority, but from credibility, preparation, and the ability to build consensus. I learned to balance decisiveness with collaboration, vision with pragmatism. Public communication remained essential. The American people looked to the presidency not just for decisions, but for reassurance, clarity, and inspiration. Speeches, press briefings, and public appearances were opportunities to convey purpose and commitment. Every message mattered. Words had the power to unify, guide, and reinforce trust. I approached these moments with deliberate care, recognizing that leadership extends beyond policy into the realm of vision and influence. The weight of the office was constant. Decisions had to be timely yet considered, bold yet calculated. The presidency demanded endurance, judgment, and unwavering focus. There were moments of uncertainty, moments when pressure felt overwhelming. Yet every challenge reinforced the lessons of my past: resilience, strategic thinking, and the commitment to serve beyond personal ambition. By the conclusion of this section, I recognize that the presidency is both a privilege and a responsibility unparalleled in its demands. It requires constant adaptation, the courage to act under pressure, and the wisdom to balance principle with practicality. Every experience, every crisis, and every interaction contributed to the ongoing shaping of a leader capable of guiding the nation through tumultuous times. Reflecting on these early months, I understood that the presidency is not a static role, but a dynamic journey. It is defined not only by policy or political victories, but by the ability to navigate uncertainty, inspire confidence, and uphold the trust of the American people. With each challenge met and each lesson learned, I became more prepared to face the unpredictable, to lead with clarity, and to serve with unwavering dedication. The path forward would continue to test every skill, every judgment, and every principle I held. Yet I was determined to meet these challenges with the experience, discipline, and commitment that had guided me throughout my life in public service. The responsibility was immense, the stakes historic, but the opportunity to shape the future of the nation was a calling I embraced fully and resolutely. By the time I had settled into the rhythm of the presidency, it became evident that leadership is defined as much by crises as by achievements. The domestic landscape demanded attention with issues that cut to the very core of American society. Civil rights, education, economic inequality, and healthcare were not abstract problems. They were urgent matters affecting millions of lives across every corner of the nation. Each policy decision required careful deliberation, a balance between idealism and pragmatism, and a willingness to confront entrenched resistance. The civil rights movement continued to be a central challenge. Leaders and activists were calling for justice that had been delayed for too long. I met with countless individuals, community leaders, governors, and ordinary citizens, listening to their concerns, their hopes, and sometimes their anger. I learned that leadership demands both moral courage and strategic negotiation. Legislation alone could not solve the deep-rooted social problems. It required vision, persistence, and the ability to mobilize both political allies and public opinion in support of justice. Education and economic opportunity were equally pressing. I traveled to schools and universities, witnessing the disparities that existed in funding, resources, and access. Conversations with teachers, administrators, and students revealed the complexity of reform. Policies that aimed to elevate one region could unintentionally disadvantage another, and well-intentioned initiatives often faced bureaucratic hurdles. These experiences underscored the need for thoughtful, well-implemented policy that considered both immediate results and long-term consequences. That on the international stage, the pressures were constant and unforgiving. The Cold War shaped every interaction, from diplomacy to military planning. I received daily briefings on global developments and worked closely with advisors to ensure that the United States responded with both strength and prudence. The world was a delicate balance of alliances, threats, and opportunities, and every decision carried potential consequences far beyond our borders. Crises emerged unpredictably. Some were the result of external forces, such as escalating tensions in foreign nations, while others were internal, including economic fluctuations and political upheaval. In each case, I learned to act decisively while remaining fully aware of the consequences. The weight of the presidency demanded constant vigilance and the capacity to respond under pressure without compromising principle. Internal administration dynamics required as much attention as public policy. Cabinet members and senior advisors brought expertise, but also perspectives that occasionally conflicted with one another or with my own instincts. The challenge was to harness their talents effectively, mediate disputes, and ensure that every decision reflected the broader goals of the administration. Leadership, I discovered, was not about asserting power alone. It was about cultivating consensus, fostering trust, and guiding the collective expertise toward actionable solutions. Public communication remained a critical tool. Every speech, address, or press briefing was an opportunity to clarify policy, inspire confidence, and project the principles of the presidency. The people expected not just governance, but reassurance and vision. I approached these opportunities with careful preparation, recognizing that words, when used responsibly, could unify, motivate, and sustain the nation through times of uncertainty. Throughout these months, I found myself reflecting frequently on the lessons I had accumulated throughout my life. The discipline learned in Texas, the patience honed in Congress, the insights gained as vice president. These experiences shaped my approach to leadership, helping me navigate the intertwined demands of domestic and foreign policy with strategic foresight and moral clarity. By the end of this chapter, it was clear that the presidency is a constant exercise in balance between principle and pragmatism, between immediate action and long-term strategy, between domestic concerns and global responsibilities. Each day brought new challenges, each decision demanded care, and each success and setback became part of the ongoing education that defines leadership at the highest level. The turbulence of these years tested every skill I had cultivated, yet it also revealed the possibilities of the office. The the ability to enact meaningful change, to safeguard the nation's interests, and to guide the United States through both opportunity and adversity. It was a period of intense learning, profound responsibility, and the steady shaping of the leader I was becoming, ready for the historic decisions that lay ahead. As my presidency progressed, it became clear that leadership is tested most severely during periods of crisis. Both domestic and international events converged to create a landscape fraught with tension, uncertainty, and profound consequence. The decisions I faced were rarely simple. Every choice had implications that could ripple across the nation and around the world. Domestically, the civil rights movement continued to demand urgent attention. Protests, sit-ins, and marches highlighted the growing impatience of a population long denied justice. I met with community leaders, activists, and elected officials to listen, learn, and formulate strategies that would advance progress while maintaining social stability. These experiences underscored a fundamental truth. Leadership requires both moral clarity and the skill to navigate complex political realities. Change was essential, but it could not come recklessly. It had to be guided by foresight and strategy. Economic pressures also loomed large. Markets fluctuated, unemployment posed challenges, and certain sectors faced uncertainty that could affect millions of families. I engaged with advisors, economists, and business leaders, assessing policies and interventions that could sustain growth while protecting the most vulnerable. The balance between immediate action and long-term planning was delicate, and I realized that even minor decisions could have far-reaching consequences. Internationally, the stakes were equally high. The Cold War persisted, with tensions escalating in multiple regions. I reviewed intelligence reports, attended high-level briefings, and consulted with diplomats and military advisors to ensure that the United States responded with both prudence and resolve. Every action required careful consideration. A single misstep could provoke conflict, undermine alliances, or threaten global stability. Leadership demanded not only strategy, but also the ability to anticipate reactions and plan contingencies. Crisis management also highlighted the importance of collaboration within the administration. Cabinet members and senior advisors brought diverse perspectives, expertise, and sometimes conflicting priorities. My role was to coordinate, mediate, and guide decision-making in ways that reflected both principle and practicality. Authority alone was insufficient. Effective leadership required building consensus, inspiring confidence, and ensuring that the team functioned cohesively under pressure. Public communication became critical in shaping both perception and action. Speeches, press briefings, and statements were more than formalities. They were instruments to unify the nation, articulate purpose, and reinforce the credibility of leadership. I approached these moments with deliberate care, understanding that words carry power. They can calm fear, inspire hope, and sustain national morale during uncertain times. These months of crisis reinforced lessons I had learned throughout my career. Preparation, patience, and adaptability are indispensable. Every scenario required careful analysis, weighing potential outcomes, and considering both immediate and long-term effects. The ability to act decisively while remaining grounded in principle was tested continuously, and each decision became part of the broader fabric of the administration's legacy. Amid these challenges, I frequently reflected on the human dimension of leadership. Behind every statistic, every policy, every diplomatic maneuver were lives profoundly affected by the choices I made. Keeping that perspective grounded my decision-making, reminding me that leadership is ultimately about service, responsibility, and the welfare of the nation. By the conclusion of this first section, it was clear that the true test of the presidency lies not in moments of ease, but in navigating crises with clarity, courage, and strategic foresight. These experiences shaped not only the administration's response to immediate challenges, but also the character, judgment, and resilience of the leader guiding the nation through turbulent times. As the presidency advanced, I learned quickly that leadership required the delicate balancing of domestic and international pressures. Decisions made in the Oval Office reverberated far beyond the walls of the White House, influencing global perceptions and shaping the nation's trajectory for decades. Every action demanded foresight, strategy, and a clear understanding of the consequences, both seen and unseen. Domestically, social unrest and political expectations intensified. The civil rights movement was no longer a distant concern. It was a defining issue of the era. I convened meetings with lawmakers, civil rights leaders, and community representatives, seeking solutions that advanced justice while maintaining public order. Leadership in these moments demanded more than policy proposals. It required moral conviction, careful planning, and the ability to anticipate both resistance and support. The challenge was to act decisively, yet with prudence, ensuring that progress was both meaningful and sustainable. Economic stability also demanded constant attention. The nation faced fluctuations in employment, inflation, and market confidence, each with real-world consequences for millions of Americans. I consulted with economic advisors, industry leaders, and regional officials, analyzing data, projecting outcomes, and preparing strategies to safeguard the nation's prosperity. The responsibility was immense. Even minor miscalculations could reverberate widely, affecting families, communities, and future policy options. Internationally, the Cold War presented a relentless series of tests. Diplomatic tensions, military posturing, and emerging conflicts required measured responses. I met with foreign leaders, reviewed intelligence, and assessed the potential ramifications of every decision. Leadership in this context demanded both courage and restraint. The stakes were global, and errors could have consequences that extended far beyond the immediate crisis. It was clear that diplomacy was as much an art as a science, requiring intuition, strategy, and a deep understanding of the motivations of allies and adversaries alike. Managing internal dynamics was equally challenging. Cabinet members and senior advisors offered expertise, but also perspectives shaped by personal experience and ambition. My task was to synthesize these inputs, mediate conflicts, and ensure that decisions reflected the broader goals of the administration. Influence came not simply from authority, but from credibility, preparation, and the ability to inspire confidence in those around me. Leadership required guiding the collective intelligence of the administration toward effective action. Public communication remained central. Speeches, addresses, and public statements were opportunities to frame the administration's vision, reassure the populace, and build trust. Every word mattered, as perception often shaped reality. I approached these moments with deliberate care, crafting messages that were both informative and inspiring, reinforcing the principles and direction of the presidency. Through these challenges, I drew upon the lessons of my previous experiences. Patience honed in the Senate, negotiation skills refined as vice president, and crisis management developed through years of public service. Each day provided new tests and opportunities for growth, sharpening judgment and deepening understanding of the complex interplay between domestic policy, international diplomacy, and public perception. By the conclusion of this section, it was clear that leadership requires constant adjustment, strategic foresight, and the ability to weigh competing priorities without losing sight of principle. The presidency is an office of relentless demands, but it is also one of extraordinary potential, the power to influence, guide, and shape the nation's future. These months underscored a critical reality. The decisions of a president are never isolated. They intertwine with the lives of citizens, the stability of institutions, and the positioning of the United States on the world stage. Navigating this complexity requires courage, clarity, and an unwavering commitment to serve the people with integrity, foresight, and dedication. As my presidency progressed, I found that leadership is defined less by routine governance than by the moments of intense pressure that demand clarity, courage, and decisive action. These defining moments test not only judgment, but character, resilience, and the capacity to weigh immediate consequences against long-term impact. It was during these episodes that the responsibilities of the office became most apparent and the weight of history most palpable. Domestic crises continued to challenge both policy and principle. Civil rights issues, economic pressures, and social unrest required a constant balancing act. I met with community leaders, legislators, and citizens from across the nation to understand the stakes, the opportunities for progress, and the potential consequences of each decision. Leadership demanded more than knowledge. It demanded empathy, foresight, and the courage to act even when outcomes were uncertain. Simultaneously, international pressures were ever present. The Cold War remained a defining context for foreign policy. Tensions with adversaries, The threat of nuclear escalation and complex diplomatic negotiations required steady judgment and strategic calculation. Each briefing, each consultation with advisors, and each meeting with foreign leaders highlighted the interconnectedness of decisions, showing how choices made in Washington could reverberate globally. The stakes were enormous, and miscalculation was not an option. Crisis management illuminated the delicate balance between decisiveness and caution. Acting too slowly could exacerbate a situation, yet hasty decisions could have catastrophic consequences. I learned to pause, analyze, and anticipate outcomes, relying on both experience and counsel. Leadership was tested in these moments, revealing the necessity of patience, clarity, and confidence in the judgment honed over years of public service. The internal dynamics of the administration also demanded careful attention. Advisors, cabinet members, and political allies each contributed insights, priorities, and ambitions. My role was to coordinate, mediate, and synthesize these perspectives into coherent strategy, ensuring that the administration operated with unity, purpose, and effectiveness. Authority alone could not guarantee success. It required the trust, expertise, and alignment of those who shared the responsibility of governance. Communication with the public remained vital. Moments of crisis intensified the scrutiny of both actions and words. Every speech, press briefing, or statement was an opportunity to clarify the administration's position, provide reassurance, and demonstrate leadership. I approached these opportunities deliberately, understanding that effective communication could stabilize uncertainty, inspire confidence, and reinforce the integrity of the presidency. Throughout these challenging months, I frequently reflected on the lessons of my life and career. From early experiences in public service to the Senate, from the vice presidency to the initial months of the presidency, each stage had prepared me to navigate complexity, anticipate challenges, and act with both principle and prudence. Crises tested these lessons in real time, forcing decisions that shaped the nation and defined my tenure. By the end of this third section, I recognized that the essence of leadership is not simply in managing day-to-day affairs, but in facing defining moments with courage, clarity, and resolve. The presidency requires the ability to act decisively under pressure while remaining grounded in principle, the foresight to anticipate consequences, and the resilience to bear the weight of responsibility with composure. These months solidified a deeper understanding of the nature of leadership, that it is forged in the crucible of challenge, measured by the ability to navigate uncertainty, and defined by the lasting impact of decisions on the nation and the world. The lessons learned, the decisions made, and the resilience demonstrated during these defining moments became part of the enduring framework that would guide the administration forward in the turbulent years ahead. Looking back on my time as president, I realized that the true measure of leadership is not found solely in legislation passed or speeches delivered, but in the enduring influence a leader has on the nation's character, its trajectory, and its place in the world. My presidency, like that of any leader, was a combination of victories, challenges, and moments that tested both principle and resolve. It is in these cumulative experiences that the impact of leadership is most clearly understood. Domestically, my administration faced a nation grappling with profound social change. Civil rights, once a marginal concern for many, had become a central moral and political imperative. Through policy, negotiation, and advocacy, we sought to advance justice and equality. These efforts were met with both support and opposition, revealing the deep divisions within society. Yet, I firmly believe that progress demanded both moral courage and strategic action. The influence of these decisions extended beyond immediate legislation. They set precedents for future administrations and helped shape the expectations of a society striving for fairness and inclusion. The Cold War cast a long shadow over my presidency, influencing both foreign and domestic policy. Decisions made in moments of tension required measured judgment and strategic foresight. From managing relations with allies to confronting adversaries, the responsibilities of leadership demanded an understanding of nuance, power, and the global implications of action. The impact of these decisions is not always visible in the moment, but history judges leaders in terms of how they navigate the pressures of their time and how their choices resonate in subsequent decades. Leadership, I learned, is as much about character as it is about policy. The ability to inspire, reassure, and mobilize the nation is inseparable from the capacity to act decisively when circumstances demand it. Every speech, address, and public engagement was an opportunity to shape perception, convey purpose, and reaffirm the principles guiding governance. The influence of these moments lies not in rhetoric alone, but in their ability to unify, motivate, and establish trust between the citizenry and the office of the presidency. Evaluating my overall impact, I recognize that influence extends beyond immediate policy outcomes. It includes setting a tone for public discourse, shaping the expectations of leadership, and leaving a framework for those who follow. Decisions regarding civil rights, education, economic policy, and international engagement all contributed to the nation's evolving identity. The presidency offered the ability to affect not only the present moment, but also the long-term character and direction of the United States. Yet, legacy is never absolute. Each decision, each policy, carries both intended and unintended consequences. Some initiatives achieved immediate success. Others faced resistance or required future administrations to continue the work. Understanding this complexity is essential for any evaluation of leadership. True influence is measured not only by what was accomplished during one's tenure, but by the enduring effects of choices on society, institutions, and global relationships. Reflecting on my personal growth through this period, I recognize that the presidency is both a privilege and an immense responsibility. The lessons learned about diplomacy, negotiation, crisis management, and the moral dimension of leadership remain relevant far beyond the term of office. Leadership requires constant reflection, the ability to learn from both successes and failures, and the capacity to act with courage and principle in the face of uncertainty. Ultimately, the impact of a presidency is most vividly realized in the way it shapes the nation's future. By fostering progress in civil rights, maintaining vigilance in foreign policy, and setting standards for leadership grounded in integrity and vision, I sought to guide the United States toward a stronger, more inclusive, and more confident position in the world. The influence of these efforts extends beyond any single administration, forming part of the ongoing story of the nation and its people that as I contemplate the broader scope of my presidency. I understand that the measure of leadership lies not only in immediate accomplishments, but in the enduring capacity to inspire, guide, and shape the character of a nation. The responsibility was immense, the challenges formidable, yet the opportunity to influence the trajectory of history was a profound honor, a responsibility that I approached with every ounce of experience, judgment, and resolve I had cultivated throughout my life.